Hi everybody, this is Jenny Smith and I work for the Trinity Challenge and I've been organising the Youth Summit on their behalf. Thank you so much for joining. We will start in a couple of minutes. We're just going to let more people access the webinar. So if you just give us 2 minutes, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, so welcome everybody to day one of the Youth Summit. We already ran a session this morning with a group of young people and youth organisations from around the world, and we're really happy to have you here with us today to talk about this incredibly important issue of antimicrobial resistance and what we can do in terms of youth participation and youth advocacy to spread the word about antimicrobial resistance. So I will just give you a brief introduction to some of our housekeeping rules. So if you have a question that you would like answering, please use the Q&A function. If you have a comment or if you'd like to tell us who you are and where you're based in the world and what your organization is, then please feel free to do that in the chat. We've got people on the Trinity Challenge team who are answering questions and supporting that chat function. So please feel free to ask anything in there. Part of the session today will be an interactive workshop, and we would really love you to engage with that workshop as much as possible. So if you at that point are able to be in a quieter location and sort of have your microphone on and things like that, that would be great. But the first section of this webinar will be webinar style with some presentations from some key stakeholders. I will now hand over to Louise Gough, who is our Chief Operating Officer, and she's going to tell you a little bit about the Trinity Challenge charity, where it came from and what our mission is. Thanks, Louise.
Thanks, Jenny, and hello to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to see you all. And thanks for your commitment to tackling one of the most pressing issues of our time, antimicrobial resistance, or AMR. So in case you don't know anything about the Trinity Challenge, it was founded in 2020 by James Davis after the COVID-19 pandemic. And what that pandemic had shown us at the time, amongst many other things, is how urgently we need better data analysis and tools and improved collaboration to enable us to be prepared for global health crises. As a charity, our mission at the Trinity Challenge is to support the creation of data-driven solutions to help protect against these global health threats. And that's because we believe that data holds the key to building effective, affordable, and scalable solutions to health emergencies. We also believe that we need innovation and collaboration to tackle these urgent health threats. And AMR, as you will all know, is one of those such threats. So many of you here today will know that in 2024, the antibiotic emergency is speaking increasingly loudly for itself. The fears that have been held for a long time by experts are now materializing in real time. And already millions die each year. The global burden of disease shows us that AMR is the third leading underlying cause of death after heart disease and stroke. So today we gather not just to discuss AMR and all the risks around it, but to harness your enthusiasm and energy. So why is youth involvement so crucial in awareness raising and advocacy for AMR? We believe that you all have a pivotal role in driving change for the future and contributing as youth leaders. Firstly, you're here because you have amazing abilities. You're adept at using technology and social media and all the new tools that are emerging that are essential in increasing awareness and steering public conversations in a new and different way. You're experts in adapting to and leveraging these changing platforms to inform millions of people across the world and inspiring people to make change and take action. You have fresh perspectives, so you're our future leaders as well as innovators, and our solutions to AMR will require these new ways of thinking and novel approaches. So we need your creativity, your energy, your determination. All of these are invaluable to our shared mission. And lastly, but most importantly, your voices really matter. So you have the power to influence your peers, your communities, and policymakers, and advocacy is about making your voice heard, about standing up for what's right and driving the change that you want to see in the world. So throughout this summit, and thank you again for joining us, you'll have the opportunity to participate in lots of different discussions led by your peers and supported by experts in the field. And you'll be collaborating on the start of an exciting journey to develop a global campaign that will raise awareness about AMR and promote responsible antibiotic use. So we encourage you to be bold, be curious, be collaborative, ask questions. No idea is a silly idea. All ideas are welcome. Learn from each other and challenge the norms. So thank you so much for your dedication. By being here today, you're taking steps towards a healthier, safer world. And together we can rise to the challenge and turn the tide against antimicrobial resistance. So I would now like to hand over to Professor Marc Mendelson, Director of the Trinity Challenge, to give a short introduction to AMR and the importance of youth advocacy on this issue. So thank you so much again for joining us. Let's make this a success. Thanks. Over to you, Marc.
Thanks very much, Louise, and a big welcome from me as well. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate that many on the webinar will be very at home with the field of antibiotic resistance, but there are some joining us who are less so. So I want to just, in 5 slides, make a few comments about why this is important and why youth voice in this is important. So if you look at what's happening in the world now, we need to think back 120 years before the advent of antibiotics. A man was cutting the grass in bare feet in the United States and got an infection, got a grass cut to his toe, which became infected. But soon that infection became worse. Of course, this was 30 plus years before Fleming had even discovered antibiotics. And the only way of saving this man's life was to amputate his foot. In 1942, the first time penicillins were used. These series of pictures of this young girl were taken, one of the first people to be treated, who had a severe infection of the skin and soft tissues around her lower jaw. And the miracle of antibiotics was suddenly apparent. Weeks before, she would have died because of no access to penicillin. Now we come to the present day, and more antibiotics are no longer working against bacterial infections. Now we talk a lot about antimicrobial resistance, or AMR. That is a term which actually has a broad meaning, but is being used interchangeably with antibiotic resistance in bacteria. And that is the focus of what we're going to be talking about in the Youth Summit. We're not interested for this purpose in other types of bugs, viruses, fungi, parasites. We're interested in bacteria and their antibiotic resistance. But in the present day, the antibiotics don't work as well as they did for too many people. And just to put it in scale, numbers tend to leave people disenfranchised and disconnected. But as Louise said, it is the 3rd underlying cause of death. But much more importantly, 2 aspects. One is it's getting worse, much worse. And the second is that it's not all about death. It's actually about modern medicine as we know it. Everything that we take for granted at the moment, when you go to a health system with an infection, go and see a doctor or a nurse, is underpinned by functioning antibiotics. And with bacterial resistance to antibiotics rising, those simple procedures like treating an infection, preventing an infection, are now threatened. And if one just stops to think about how much antibiotics play a role in modern medicine, just think about surgical operations, the vast majority of which require a functioning antibiotic to be given to you half an hour to an hour before the cut is made. That way, we don't get wound infections like that young girl, perhaps, in the photos would have done, and who had catastrophic consequences. So antibiotics underpin surgery, becomes far more threatening, far more increase in people being unwell and dying from surgical operations if we don't have functioning antibiotics. And then all people with immune systems who are compromised also require antibiotics. Of course, in cancer therapy, chemotherapy and radiotherapy underpin the treatment of the cancer, but those patients' immune systems are severely compromised and they get more bacterial infections. So antibiotics too underpins cancer therapy. It underpins our treatment and their ability to manage patients with HIV and on other immune suppressing drugs. And really everything we've taken for granted for in human health requires antibiotics. Now, antibiotic resistance in bacteria doesn't just affect humans, it's a one health problem. It affects humans, animals, and it affects the environment. And unfortunately, the more antibiotics we use, the more antibiotic resistance in bacteria occurs and the problem increases. Now, in our food production systems, our food security is totally dependent on functioning antibiotics to keep our food producing animals well. So if you have an ill chicken or ill cow or an ill pig, you'll need to treat them with an antibiotic. But antibiotics aren't just used to treat ill animals. They're used to treat animals who could become sick, and that's called widespread prevention or metaphylaxis. And water and food that animals get can be added to by antibiotics, and farmers can buy those from cooperatives and just give those to the animals to prevent infection just in case. And then probably the most antibiotic that's currently still used, although in parts of the world it is banned, is for animal growth promotion. So we know that small concentrations of antibiotics increase the muscle mass of the animals and gets them to market quicker, increasing the profits. So what we need to do to reduce antibiotic use in animal health and in our food production systems is to reduce antibiotic growth promotion and to reduce the widespread spread just in case prevention methods. So it's not only our food animals, of course, it's also our pets. Miss Tiddles and Rex, the Alsatian, your friendly pooch, also gets antibiotics from the veterinarians. And that too can also cause antibiotic resistance in bacteria in and on pets, and they can be transferred between your pets and you, and vice versa can occur. So animal health needs functioning antibiotics, but it is also a major site of overuse of antibiotics. And then lastly, in the triad of human, animal, and environmental health is the environment. The main problem with the environment, there are bacteria in the environment, and one of the main problems is that we don't have in so much of the world, particularly in our low middle income countries, safe, clean water and safe sanitation. Still, 90% of the 490 odd million people who practice open defecation into waterways actually live in the global south. Also, pharmaceutical companies that make antibiotics will pump out their waste into waterways and water systems, and those will include antibiotics and their breakdown products. And if there are bacteria in that environment, then the bacteria exposed to antibiotics, that can drive antibiotic resistance in bacteria in the environment, and those can enter the food chain and the whole cycle occurs. So we really, in environmental health, we need better clean water and safe sanitation practices, and we need to attend to how we're polluting the environment. So really, as said, antibiotic resistance in bacteria is a one health problem. Now, a lot of the youth activism, and when we think about youth activism, what comes to mind is commonly youth activism around climate change. And climate change and antibiotic resistance in bacteria actually have one thing particularly in common. In fact, they have many things. But the main focus is that like climate change, the problem of antibiotic resistance is something called the problem of the global commons. In other words, what you do affects other people. So in climate change, so clean air and effective antibiotics are both common global goods. If you put petrol into your car and use your car, or if you burn fossil fuels, you are affecting the air that other people can breathe. If you give somebody an antibiotic unnecessarily, then the bacteria in and on their bodies can be resistant. You can select out resistant bugs, they become a dominant population, and then they get transferred by touch over to other people. So both climate change and antibiotic resistance of bacteria are both problems of the global commons, and they need a multidisciplinary approach with everybody on board. And youth activism is going to be incredibly important going forward. And as Louise said, youth activism and youth voices are critical in changing the system. Now, there is no view here in the work you're going to be doing, no point of view that is off limits. It is a challenge to you. We call to you to innovate in your ideas and thinking. No such thing as a silly question, no such thing as an idea. That we know that innovation can come from often the most unusual areas and unusual discussions. So be bold, go for it, and let's try and form some campaigns that will really change the needle here and help in the global response to antibiotic resistance in bacteria. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much to Louise and Marc for that introduction into the Trinity Challenge, why we're here, and the global health challenge that we face of antibiotic resistance. So we really wanted to share a patient story as part of this youth summit, because storytelling is a huge part of awareness raising and campaigning, and the impact that storytelling can have on a subject is incredibly powerful. So Diane Shader-Smith has shared with us the story of her daughter who unfortunately died from AMR, but that sad occurrence has then inspired a whole campaign of awareness raising, and now they've actually just launched a global campaign on the diary of a patient, which is about giving that voice to the patient within the medical process. So I think if Hamish is able to share that now, that would be fantastic.
Patient stories remind us that at the core of the AMR crisis are individuals, each with dreams, each with struggles, each with hope that there will be better solutions to combat this global health threat. My interest in all this started back in 1995 when I was a young working mom, happily married to Marc, and we had two beautiful and kind children, Micah and Mallory. You can imagine the heartbreak we felt when Mallory was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. How do you tell your 3-year-old that she has a life-altering lung disease, that she will need to inhale multiple medications every day, and have her chest pummeled by a machine hard enough to dislodge the sticky mucus that gets stuck in the lungs? There was no children's book back then to explain this disease, so I wrote it, Mallory's 65 Roses, because 65 roses is what kids hear when adults say cystic fibrosis. This book taught Mallory the power of narrative. Despite her diagnosis, Mallory had a happy childhood with no significant health challenges until she was colonized by Burkholderia caenocepacia, bacteria known for its resistance. Her doctor said that this would change the trajectory of her life. What I heard was that my daughter Mallory had an expiration date. Once Mallory understood that her bacteria might someday kill her, she started writing in a journal to process her feelings. These are her words. I didn't realize that my chance encounter with an opportunistic pathogen was like walking up to the devil's vending machine. I gave up my life as I knew it, and in return, I was left with the sinking and undeniable reality of my mortality, null and void, erased. Cepacia entered the microbial ecosystem of my lungs uninvited, waiting until my body was vulnerable to make its move. Microscopic armies of these bacterial cells then marched in and set up camp. During my first hospitalization at the start of 7th grade, my medical team came into my room to talk through the treatment plan after they had already started me on a cocktail of IVs. It would happen this way with each subsequent admission. Routinely in this order, cultures were taken, antibiotics were prescribed, drug susceptibility tests were performed, and cocktails were altered. This contributes to resistance. Faster diagnostics would have helped stave off this issue, which is another critical part of antibiotic stewardship. To clear her mind of negative thinking, Mallory developed a mantra, live happy. And by outward appearances, she did just that. Mallory was family-oriented, a straight-A student, and a 3-sport varsity athlete. Second half of her senior year, Mallory got very sick, and of this time, she writes, as the days wear on, I find myself panicking as I grow more oxygen dependent, experiencing pain with breathing, no longer able to walk without help. But outside of the hospital, life goes on. Even if I do get out in time for prom, I won't be able to find a date. I asked her water polo coach, Rob Bowie, pictured here, to see if he could help. And the next day, Dylan walked in with flowers, which motivated Mallory to work hard to get her strength back. It paid off, and to her surprise, she was voted prom queen. It was an incredible evening until the after party when some idiot threw a smoke bomb into the venue. Mallory's throat started to burn. Her lungs were searing. Her eyes and her nose were watering. And then hemoptysis, when the airways bleed. Mallory writes of this experience, each time it happens, I wonder if this will be the time when the blood spilling up my lungs and out my mouth isn't just a scare, but the final, swift, deadly bullet. Terrifying moments like this had distilled for Mallory a profound understanding of how precarious life was. It's why she felt the need to document everything, to collect the wisps, the threads of her untidy happenings. These are her words. As my bacteria became increasingly resistant, I grow decreasingly confident in the plans that I had etched in my mental map until it's hard to remember they were ever there. I am working very hard to see beauty in a life that looks quite different from the one I wanted, the one I expected. Mallory was finding her voice and she wanted to use it. And in her high school graduation speech, she quotes the universally respected English philosopher Winnie the Pooh. I used to believe in forever, but forever was too good to be true. These are words that she chose for their relevance to her classmates, but that also had a private meaning, inspired by what she refers to as the dark voices in my head, the brokers of hopelessness. College presented new challenges because after growing up with a helicopter mom, Mallory was ready to be on her own, but it was a difficult transition. And she writes about the duck syndrome. When you're like a duck gliding on the water, what no one sees is that underneath we are paddling furiously. The stress of working to make things seem effortless creates a vicious cycle of silence and struggle. The crazy thing is that no one understood Mallory's distress because she still looked so healthy that everyone thought she was the golden girl who had it all. Mallory would have traded everything for the chance to take a breath that didn't hurt, to have a life that wasn't ravaged by resistant bacteria. Straddling the sick and the well worlds, Mallory understood that amplifying patient voices could have implications for society, which is why she spent 10 years documenting what it was like to live with bacteria that was a known killer. 67 hospitalizations led Mallory to write I am limited in what I can do, but not in what I can say. Resistant bacteria does a lot of taking, of dreams, of time, of travel, of friendships, of freedom, of potential, of plans, of lives. It's a complex, unpredictable, irreversible, progressive, painful, suffocating, choking weed. When I developed a fungal infection, things got even more complicated and emotionally traumatic. I used to have fun. I used to be fun, but now I'm afraid of everything, of being myself, but also of losing who I am, that the choices I make are going to cut my life short. I am going to be on IVs for the rest of my life, and it's very hard on the liver. I'm afraid that I won't be happy, that I won't have friends or a significant other. Sex with a PICC line or an IV drip? Ugh, I am afraid I will always just be that sick girl. And yet Mallory persevered, graduating from Stanford Phi Beta Kappa, ready to take on the world. But doctors said she could not do environmental field work that she had trained for because it would further damage her lungs. Mallory was devastated, but she had to move on. She got hired to write a book, The Gottlieb Native Garden, a California love story. But working independently was lonely, so Mallory interviewed for a writing job at a company with lots of young employees. They made her an offer based on her writing samples, but when she disclosed her medical condition, they withdrew it. Shortly after, a lung function test led to a hospital admission. Once again, Mallory was distraught. This time because she had to cancel a third date with a guy she really liked. I said, invite him to the hospital. Why not see if he can handle it? One very special nurse helped her get ready for the date. Nurse Ashley washed her hair, gave her a pedicure and a facial, and ran to the drugstore to get Mallory mascara. This while she was in the ICU. Mallory had a wonderful time on her date, even though he wasn't her person. And in fact, Dave is happily married to a man and they have a beautiful baby. As Mallory's body deteriorated, she sharpened her mind, crystallized her thinking, honed her writing skills, and hoped to find love. It was New Year's Eve, 2015, when Mallory met Jack, who I call her real-life Prince Charming. They were having so much fun, but suddenly Mallory was back in the hospital. The antibiotics had stopped working, and the only option left was transplant. The approval meant a cross-country move since UPMC was the only center willing to take on her complicated case. So Mallory had to say goodbye to everyone, knowing she might not make it back. There were oh so many tears. Jack is holding the dog in the picture on the right, and Mallory is hugging her brother Micah on the left. Once in Pittsburgh, Mallory struggled to breathe. She struggled to stay hopeful. She worried that her bacteria would kill her before new lungs arrived, that she would end up in the ICU clinging to life. If that happens, she writes, I want to be as comfortable as possible through opioids or anti-anxiety meds, but not be so out of it that I'm unconscious unless the pain is severe enough to necessitate that. I want to maintain dignity to whatever extent possible, to receive whatever life-saving tactic is appropriate, to be able to communicate in some way, to have the blinds open for natural light, to have calming music to listen to have my mom or dad with me always. I want to live. The call for lungs finally came, but it was a false alarm. And many months later, the fourth call was a go. Despite her fears, Mallory was so excited to receive the gift of life, new lungs. The recovery was grueling, but 1 month later, Mallory was celebrating her 25th birthday without supplemental oxygen. It was the happiest time as we dared to dream about a new life back in California, because at this point we were still in Pittsburgh. But just a few weeks later, the cepacia was back. Doctors told us it was fully resistant and that there were no more treatments. My husband, Marc, was not willing to accept that, So he went in search of phage therapy. Epidemiologist Stephanie Strathdy tweeted for researchers to help us find a cocktail while our closest friends and family gathered to be with us. Because Mallory was on a ventilator, she scribbled this note, which reads, "Can't talk at all, but so grateful you are all here for the hardest part." During this time, the United States Navy was quietly working on a treatment for an invisible enemy that they called Iraqi Bacter, resistant bacteria causing serious infections to military personnel wounded in battle. Herculean efforts enabled the United States Navy to prepare and deliver a phage match for Mallory's isolate of Cepacia. And that night, Mallory became the first patient in the United States with cystic fibrosis to receive phage therapy under the FDA's compassionate use provision. We were so happy. The phages are in the box on the left. But the very next morning, doctors said that Mallory had been without oxygen for too long and advised us to make the gut-wrenching decision to remove life support. Saying goodbye to Mallory was impossible. But then the autopsy report came back revealing that the phages had started to work. Mallory just didn't get them in time. Marc could not save his daughter, but he was certain that phage therapy could save others. So we shared Mallory's story with the media. We urged the medical community to take a closer look at phages, and we raised money to make the inaugural grant to IPATH, which is now leading the first ever NIH-funded trial using phage therapy. During this time, Marc went dipping for phages in a sewage treatment with the Yale team working on this, while I worked with Random House to have Mallory's writings published posthumously as Salt in My Soul. All of this led to the documentary of the same name. Was it fate, or was it divine intervention when the largest study to date about superbugs was published in The Lancet on the very same day the New York Times referred to Salt in My Soul as an awareness-raising tool about the possibilities of bacteriophages? And then Forbes writer Judy Stone penned the headline, "Poignant Film Calls Attention to the Need for Phages for Antibiotic Resistance." When medicine and media align, there is an opportunity to amplify the message, to educate a broader audience, and to mobilize public and political will towards actionable change. Mallory gives voice to those battling against resistant bacteria and fungal infections. And since she isn't here to use it, I do so on her behalf every chance I get. At medical schools, conferences, corporations, community events, Capitol Hill, the White House, the UK, Australia, the European Commission, and NATO. To date, I have given almost 300 talks. What's shocking is that most of the time I speak to people who have never heard of AMR. Or if they have heard of it, they don't understand what it stands for. My theory is that it's because they are confused by what I call the alphabet soup of acronyms we use. AMR for antimicrobial resistance, AR for antibiotic resistance, DRI for drug-resistant infections, DR for drug resistance, MDR for multiply drug resistant, and some use the word superbugs. In fact, the World Health just issued a communication where they were talking about AB for antibiotic resistance. Our brains need clear concepts to make sense of things. We need to use a singular term so people understand. Take cancer, for example. You say that word in any language and people get it, even though it refers to many different diseases. This sense of urgency that I'm feeling, which I'm getting from the people who are working on this, comes from being dangerously close to a post-antibiotic era. Kevin Outerson, who is the executive director of CarbX, says there is a way to fix this, that the science to address AMR is extraordinary, but the business model is broken. The good news is that because there's been a collapse in the drug development pipeline and a lack of state-of-the-art diagnostics at the same time, superbugs are proving to be a formidable enemy. Many drug companies, governments, and medical researchers are collaborating on a global revival of antibiotics, antifungals, phage therapy, and better diagnostics. But it's not enough. We need AMR to penetrate our consciousness. We need a worldwide aha moment where people understand just how many people will die or have died from AMR. To a patient like Mallory with a superbug, to the parent of a child suffering from resistant bacteria, to a healthcare provider trying to save the life of someone with AMR, there is nothing more important than finding treatments that will work against resistant bacteria. We need faster diagnostics, antibiotic stewardship, and phage therapy. Mallory was only 12 when AMR came for her and derailed her life. She had so much to live for. There is a human death toll to the dearth of effective treatments and the dearth of targeted diagnostics that could help us preserve the current drugs in our arsenal. We think of lifespan in terms of human life, but antibiotics also have a lifespan, which is why we need to be more careful with how we deploy them. I had my aha moment after speaking at the National Amputee Coalition Conference. I learned that amputees are at increased risk of bacterial infections and that perfectly healthy people can get infections that lead to amputations. Take Tori Kinnaman, a gymnast at Duke University who contracted a superbug in the athletic setting and almost lost her life. And then there's Katie Granger, a perfectly healthy woman who got sepsis from a simple cut and had to have her legs and her fingertips amputated. It's clear that no one is safe. As we mourn the many millions who have died or will die from AMR, it's important to think about patients and their stories as a way to raise awareness, because there's so much that can be learned through the voices and experiences of people living with and dying from AMR, more so than through the details of a particular strain of bacteria. They are as diverse. Dr. Dominique Monet, who runs the AMR department at the European CDC, says that we need to educate the next generation of AMR to contribute to desperately needed solutions. To that end, Random House published an adaptation of Salt in My Soul called Diary of a Dying Girl, with a clear focus on the physical and mental health challenges of living with AMR. They call it an eye-opening exploration of a global public health crisis told through the voice of a high school and then college student in language they can understand and relate to. It was the inspiration for the global AMR Diary Project, collective storytelling to shift perspectives and shape policy, because we need to gather the stories of patients, families, healthcare professionals, and researchers that will underscore the urgencies of this crisis. And then we need to present these stories to those who can make the desperately needed changes. By bringing these stories to life, we can trigger the transformation in perception that will make this crisis feel real, were and are preventable. Thank you.
Thank you to Diane Shader-Smith for sharing her story, for sharing the story of her daughter, and for inspiring us all to see where patient advocacy, young person advocacy really has a place in the mitigating antimicrobial resistance, which is what we're all here to do. So I'm just going to give a short overview of the Youth Summit before we introduce Rachel, who is our partner from Black Sands, who has a presentation on successful campaigning and will then lead us into the breakout rooms. I just wanted to give an introduction as to where this came from. So Dame Sally Davies, our founder, is incredibly passionate about youth advocacy, and in many of the roles that she takes on at the minute, really tries to champion the youth voice. And so she really encouraged us to hold a youth summit and to make it something that is really co-designed with young people. So we've really tried to fit that into the work that we're doing today. One thing I would really love to talk to you about is what will happen in the breakout sessions. So we are really trying to create a globally co-designed awareness campaign for antimicrobial resistance, something that is adoptable in any part of the world and adaptable to the messaging and the needs of that group of people. It's something that we can look at different topic areas and apply these campaigning principles to, and manage to come out with something that works for everybody, that everybody can take home and look at. One of the things that we are not trying to do here today, because other organizations have already done incredible work in these areas, is things like creating a youth manifesto on AMR, which the WHO Youth AMR group has just done a fantastic piece of work and produced a manifesto, which I will share in the chat a little bit later on. There's also React Africa, who've created a statement on AMR, which is again a fantastic piece of work, both available on the Youth Voice pages of our Trinity Challenge website. What we're trying to do here, as I've said, is create a globally adaptable youth voice campaign that will raise awareness of antimicrobial resistance within different audiences. So just keep that in mind. We have a very limited amount of time today. The breakout rooms will come and go in a blink of an eye, and we just want to make sure, although we really want you to bring your expertise and bring your knowledge from your organization, we also want you to bring that with a very clear focus of filling in the Miro board and answering the questions that are in there, so that what comes out at the other end is something that we can take forward to day 2 of the Trinity Challenge, and then you and your organization can look to bid for seed funding for that in order to deliver that campaign in the next few weeks. We're just trying to go for the thing that is going to bring the most impact in a period of time that is very focused on antimicrobial resistance. You know, we've got a lot of high-level meetings coming up and really important topics to discuss. So just have that in the back of your mind when you're in the breakout rooms with our fantastic facilitators. And yeah, thank you for listening to that overview of the Youth Summit. I will now hand over to Rachel Bloodworth, who is our partner organisation, our partner organisation Black Sands, to give a overview of successful campaigning. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Jenny, and such a moving start to the session. I'm going to talk to everybody about some of the principles behind designing a campaign, which we're hoping will help to get everyone thinking ahead of the session in the Zoom rooms, as Jenny mentioned. So I'm just going to attempt to share screen now, bear with me. Okay, hopefully that's working okay. Let me just move where you've all gone. Excellent. Okay, so there's 2 stages to a successful campaign: designing the campaign and then planning the campaign. For this session, I'm going to talk predominantly about how you design the campaign, and then in the second day of the Youth Summit, we'll focus a little bit more on planning that campaign. But some of the thinking here will help us to get from a standing start in the breakout discussion to hopefully a campaign at the end of it. So my computer did not want to move along there. There we go. In terms of the stages that come under the design phase, first of all, we need to get really clear on the change that we want to see in the world. Then we need to look at who has the power to make that change or to influence that change. So who are our target audiences? We need to be clear how we've been successful, what success looks like, how we might measure it. And then really importantly, and especially for today, to get creative in our thinking. And as we've heard from some of the speakers at the start of the session, it's really important now that we bring bold and forward thinking and ambitious ideas to the table to help us move forward quickly in the crisis that we're in. So starting with what that change is. We like to look at this through 3 steps. So getting really clear on which part of the crisis we want to create a campaign on, and identifying the exact problem that can be solved with that activity. Once that's been identified, you can go on and really explore what some of the root causes are behind that problem, and equally what some of the effects of the problem are. So as an example, you might take the problem that needs to be solved is that we need to raise awareness of the overuse of antibiotics in farming. The causes that sit behind that might be the demand for factory farming and cheap food, as well as a lack of regulation. And what are the effects of that? The result is the overuse of antibiotics in the food chain, leading to resistance. So really just starting to unpack the problem that needs to be solved. Once that's clear, it's time to really look at who can influence that change. And I've got here just a very basic power mapping chart that can be used to really help to prioritize which audiences you need to go to first. So those that will end up in the top right-hand corner as having the most influence and the greatest likely support for your objective might be where you're most effective to focus your resources. Next, looking at what success looks like. Now that you know who you're targeting and on what, it's time to take a step back and really think in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, what does that success look like? Now, on this next slide, my colleague Liz made me do a correction before I shared it with you today. I had a direct line from A to B, A being the problem that you need to solve with your campaign, and B, the impact and the change in the world. And she said, no, Rachel, you can't have a straight line. Campaigning is not linear. There's not going to be one thing that you do that gets you to the outcome. And it's going to be a little bit wobbly along the way. So when you think about success and what success looks like in your breakout rooms, I encourage you to also really think about the steps along the way that helped you get there. What is it that the success is, but then how did you achieve it? And what were the important factors in that? Once you've done that, you're ready to get creative. That's the fun bit. And as I mentioned before, today and at the beginning of any campaign planning is the time to start without practical constraints. Don't be restricted by everything that you can't do, and start with a mindset that everything is possible, because we really, really need to have that creative and bold and ambitious approach to campaigning on this issue. And it's really easy to get practical later. It's much harder to elevate your thinking later on. In the second day of the Youth Summit, we'll talk a little bit more about what comes into planning the detail of a campaign around SMART objectives, the call to action, timeline, and some measurement KPIs. But for now, we're going to get back to designing. And here's the list of topics that everyone will have seen. And there's a list here of which, oh no, it's not quite shown up on Youth Voices. Oh no, it is, yes. In the lighter colour is the categories that we're going to be brainstorming in the breakout rooms as per people's opt-ins. And we had good discussions on these in our first session of the day as well. And then just a mention on the breakout rooms, you've got the chat function within Zoom, and everybody in the breakout room will have a scribe, a support from the team who can help to keep an eye out for those comments. Hopefully everyone has been able to access the Miro links and can have has the ability to partake on Miro. If not, then the team will help you to get your comments onto the board. And for facilitators, if there are any issues over everyone using Miro, then it is the discussion that's most important. So just use the Miro for yourself to keep a track of the conversation. And I can just show you one last slide here, which will show you what the Miro boards will look like. And everybody should be able to scroll in and back out. And if you double click on the post-its, you can edit those. But any problems, and I'll also be able to drop into the groups to check everyone is managing to operate that okay. So I hope you enjoy your discussions that follow.
Thanks so much, Rachel, for that introduction to campaigning. So as we mentioned beforehand, think about the objectives, think about an impactful campaign that you've seen and take inspiration from it. There are no bad ideas. Everybody's voice deserves to be heard. So listen to each other, remain respectful, and try and be conscious of the time that we've got in there. Just to make sure that we make the best use of time, and be kind to our facilitators, because they're all lovely and they've all given their time to us to support this session today. So just a reminder about the group work. You've already been assigned. So if you pre-selected your topic choice, then you will have been pre-assigned to that topic area. If you didn't manage to do that, then don't worry, you will just be allocated into a group that needs you. If you're able to, please turn on your microphone and camera and engage with the facilitators as best you can. If you're unable to do that, then as Rachel said, please use the chat function on Zoom to have your voice heard and recorded in this process. There'll be a link to the Miro board in the chat, so you're able to access it and edit the Miro board yourself. But if you can't do that, then the scribe and facilitator in the room are there to support you. If anybody needs anything, then get in touch with us and we will drop into your breakout room to help. Okay, and now I will open all the breakout rooms and you will magically go where you need to be. Hello, everybody, and I hope I didn't surprise attack you when I brought you out of the rooms there. Thank you so much for participating in the breakout sessions and really engaging with our facilitators and the Miro boards, and helping to co-design these campaigns that we've been working on. So really fantastic work, and we appreciate your time and effort. So now we're going to hear from the facilitators of the different groups, and they're just going to give a brief overview of what happened in the room and give a little bit of information about the 4 tasks that you guys have been working on. The first session facilitator that I will call on is Thea Verma, and they were working on the Youth Voices project. So Sia, if you're okay, I can see you, perfect. To give a little bit of feedback about what you heard in the room. If you'd like to share your screen and show the Miro board, then that is fine. I will just make you a co-host so that you can do that. And yes, thank you so much, and take it away.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, give me 1 second while I share my screen. Can everyone see this all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Okay, so start right there. So in our group, we got to hear some pretty amazing ideas. I think it eventually came down to leveraging social media and other media channels. So participants in our group really aim to incorporate survivor stories by making short, impactful videos of AMR patient activists and survivors, and having them broadcast clear information that is also sustainable, meaning that it should be able to last rather than being a one and done thing. So by using this content, they aim to find the right stakeholders, such as medical practitioners, health organizations, activists, and researchers to spread and engage with this content. And yeah, those were the key ideas from all of our participants.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing. And we will have a look at the mirror board as well so that we can have a more detailed view of everyone's ideas. It looks like it was a very busy board. So thank you so much for sharing that information with us. So our second campaign area was healthcare education, and in there we had Augusto and Ezekiel who were facilitating and scribing. So if you, Augusto, amazing, thank you, I can see you there. If you're able to give an overview of the discussion in your room, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Sure thing. Hello, everybody. Let me just quickly share my screen here. Okay. So we had a very fruitful discussion, and development of our mirror board within our team. So we first try to outline what is our vision and what is that we want to achieve. Or the people spoke, and the two main topics that came up were to try to raise awareness and to make sure that we are doing so through understandable and digestible concepts and language of what AMR is, especially within the community and the professional level. And as second, to achieve a better management and or regulation of AMR at an institutional level as well, and in a widespread sense. Okay, so we came up with what we wanted to achieve. So who we wanted to reach. And again, democracy spoke here. As you can see, there's plenty of dots here. So there was no contest to where we wanted to direct our efforts. And our participants wanted to try to tackle these awareness and management topics through reaching out to the Ministry of Health and the education systems that included as well the Ministry of Education. So from our key audience, we moved through the dissemination pathways, or what are the ways that we would like to reach out to these audiences. And the top three were social media, the traditional media such as TV and radio, and through one-on-one direct face-to-face meetings and or workshops. Okay, so we came up trading these three ideas and tried to outline some main ideas of what we wanted to craft as a campaign. So we have two main englobing ideas because many of them merge together into a very interesting and powerful campaign outlines. So for example, we have the first, where we wanted to target the MOA, the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education, to incorporate community-focused action of AMR, such as an idea to tackle from the big boss to trickle down to the community. So some of the ideas, the concrete ideas that they had, was to make use of good practices and lessons learned from past efforts to bolster effectiveness into the campaign, to lay ground an evidence-based strategy and a concrete plan of action to create materials for dissemination through social media, media personalities, and use of as well of community groups as pressure points for the ministries, and to establish a monitoring and evaluation strategy to ensure that the impact is, or that we are achieving what we actually said we wanted to achieve. And another main idea that we had, that our group had, was to incorporate AMR into the education system. Concrete ideas were to make sure that the incorporation includes all levels of education, from the primary to the superior education, to incorporate tests for students as a measure of impact and success for the campaign, and as well to engage youth through dynamic activities at their educational institutions. So you see, there was a very thorough participation I would like just to thank our wonderful participants, Juliana, Sahib, Samkele, Samuel, Olive, and Veronica as well, who were just so amazing in crafting all these ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Augusto, and thank you to the group of participants who engaged in the healthcare education topic. It sounded like, again, a very detailed discussion, looking at different stakeholders and approaches on how to incorporate antimicrobial resistance knowledge and education into the healthcare system. So thank you so much for sharing. So our next group was the farming and agriculture group, which was facilitated by Samantha Serrano and scribed by Louise. I think Samantha will be feeding back for us, and I can see you there. So take it away, Samantha. Thank you.
Great. Let me just see if I can share my screen as well. Here we are. For our topic, we wanted to look at how we can convince large-scale farming to stop giving medically useful antibiotics to healthy animals. We had a really great group of folks that provided some really interesting ideas, from working with policymakers to working directly with the farmers themselves. In terms of who we thought had the power to make change, you can see there was the only group that actually got 2 votes on it, because there was just so many folks to be influenced in regards to this issue, was farming associations and trade unions, which I think was a good group for us to go with. And then when we discussed, how we can reach or influence farming associations and trade unions in regards to antibiotic use and misuse, our number one by far voted option was to look at digital services that provide value for the agricultural products of farmers, and try to get involved in passing information through those pathways. And so when it came down to developing ideas around, reaching this group through digital services, we had one of our participants had the idea of adding info boxes about AMR when farmers go to purchase antibiotics for their animals, raising awareness about the issue and behaviors to avoid, in the digital platform. We also took note that not all of the people from farming associations and farmers are going to be accessing digital platforms. So we need to have alternative options, in print and in stores and things like that. And there was a lot of discussion on just how to build products that will be useful for farmers as well, that can be sold on the digital platform, and using research to get that and provide information through those products. So that's where we were at. It was a really great group. It was great to hear from folks and see their ideas written out on the Miro board. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Samantha, for feeding back. And I think it's very interesting, sort of the crossovers that we've had with this morning's group, but also just the interconnectedness of the different topics, and how, whether you're looking at frontline workers or ministers or policymakers, there's different approaches that you can take for raising awareness, and some of that is communication, some of that is using digital tools. So fascinating. Thank you. Okay, our final group is the WASH and Schools group, which was facilitated by Jess Mitchell, who I can see on the screen now. Thanks, Jess. If you're able to feedback, that would be great.
Yep. Hello, I'm not going to share our board. It just needs a bit of tweaking. So we didn't have great accessibility, so we tended to use the chat for our discussions. So in our group, I think the key word that came up a lot was context. So about making campaigns specific to the context of the school-age children, but also specific to the WASH context of that area and how important that was. So as we moved through the board, we focused a lot of discussions on policymakers, but the audience that we focused on for task 4 was community leaders specifically, because a lot of colleagues in our group have experience in this area, and they identified them as a really key group to be targeting your campaigns to before you can really do anything else on the ground. We talked a lot about context in terms of how we engage with those community leaders and what a campaign would look like. We had repeated themes coming up about giving people examples of lived reality. So showing people how different demographics of people experience WASH and AMR related issues. This could be through storytelling. It could be through, walkabouts and actual visits. And that would actually be part of your campaigning before you moved on to an intervention or an event. We also talked about using existing AMR advocates in the area or in close contexts or areas that are similar to where you're wanting to work to raise awareness of AMR in really meaningful and contextually impactful language. So I will tidy up the board a little bit to reflect that. But I think for us, it was context that came across the most strongly in all of our discussions.
Thanks so much, Jess, and no problem about the board. I think that each group works differently dependent on the needs of the audience, and I guess that's exactly what was the result of your discussion, is that meeting the needs of the people that you're trying to engage and trying to get these ideas over to is important, whether it's focused on age or region or part of the world or some other contributing factor. It's important to have the context. So that was the last one of our groups. Thank you so much, Jess, for feeding back. So now we're going to launch a poll, and we just want you to think about the 4 different areas that have just been fed back on, and which of those that you've heard today do you think has the most potential to take forward into day 2 of the Trinity Challenge Youth Summit, which will take place next Tuesday. Which one of those do you has the most potential, which we can develop further? So not that it's a finished product, not that it's sort of a campaign that's ready to go, something that we can all come together again on Tuesday and look at and go into more detail, and look at like what Rachel was talking about during her speech on target audiences and KPIs and measurable outcomes and what we want the impact to be. That's what we're planning to do on Tuesday. So which of the 4 that you've just heard back from has the most potential for you? I will launch the poll now, so keep an eye out for it on your screen. Okay, fantastic that people are engaging with the poll. Thank you so much. If we end with a draw of 2 different ones having the same number of votes, then we will do a second poll. But currently, it's looking like we have a winner. Okay, I'll just leave it open for 15 more seconds, and then we've had a minute. Okay, thank you so much for that. So that makes it very easy for us. So it's healthcare education that has that has won this afternoon and that will be taken forward as the day 1 session 2 winning campaign into day 2 of the Youth Summit, which, like I said, will take place next Tuesday. The session will be running from 12 until 3 British summertime. We really hope that you can all join us. We will be diving into a bit more detail of the campaigns and looking at what works and what doesn't work, thinking about some key messages and some ideas that, like we said previously, are adoptable across the world globally, but also adaptable to the different regions and the needs of those regions. So we really hope that you can join us next week. We'll be sending out some information between now and then. We've had a really big sign up for Tuesday, and so we'll be hoping to work again with our fantastic facilitators to make sure that we've got the people in the room to help you focus on these different ideas and really develop something and co-design something with experts in this field, but also with people who are part of that youth demographic. So if you haven't already registered, you can still register. If you'd like to get in touch with me, then that would be fantastic. I can pop my email address in the chat. If anybody needs a certificate of attendance, then we're also happy to issue those. And please feel free to email me. I will again just pop it in the chat. Oh, thank you, Hamish. Yes, there's lots of different time zones joining us. We did try today to meet the needs of some different time zones, but on Tuesday we'll just be running one session, so hopefully you can make it that time. On Tuesday we'll also be announcing the competition that we'll be running and the opportunity for seed funding in order to deliver the winning campaign that comes out of Tuesday. What we really hope for today is that you feel inspired and excited about campaigning within antimicrobial resistance, that maybe you've made some connections within the breakout room that you were in of people either in your area or globally that you can connect with on these really important topics. There's so many wonderful projects and wonderful things going on in youth organizations and youth-led organizations that we really want to spotlight and champion the work that's going on there. But at the same time, feel that we could bring you all together behind a globally co-designed campaign that we can push for in the coming months. So finally, I just wanted to say thank you so much to our facilitators for giving us the time today to support this session, to all of our attendees who've joined, and to everyone in the background who is making it work. We really appreciate all your support. We will hopefully see you next Tuesday, and thank you again.